So we don't need any motions though, do we, Rod?
No, I think we're all good, so.
All right, we're back out of the closed session, back in our regular meeting, moving still on strategic planning and talking about asset management. One of our priorities was to have a policy by July. Rod, any update on where that is? I know that was sort of under your bailiwick. Oh no, that was actually a little bit under you and a little bit under Public Works, but give us an update on that.
Yeah, I'm hoping from the policy perspective, it's not going to be in-depth. It's going to be pretty generic, but it sets the framework. More important pieces will be some of the underlying pieces to support it. And one of the things that Council has already approved is our application for the grant. That somewhat slides into it because even though you have a policy, you've got to have a lot of foundational pieces to actually deliver on that policy. So those are the two things that have been done on this piece of it. So to answer your question specifically, the policy, yeah, we can get it done. And there's additional pieces that have already been done to support that.
Okay, and that's the grant's gone in, and I believe that, back in November, we applied for the grant. It had went in at that time. Is there any update on that grant?
A little bit. So I've got to commend the MMSA for taking the lead on the whole thing. And they were involved in several meetings with the FCM to figure out what's our best chances were, because I think you may recall that there's a couple options. There's one to go on your own. And I think there was a maximum of 55,000 or 75,000. I think if you 50,000 if you act on your own, but if you were part of a bigger group, you could go for 75,000. So at the end of the day, we did apply on our own, but it was a joint submission. So that grant actually changed to a higher amount, to 75,000. And I think altogether there was about at least 6 municipalities that joined that whole grant application process. And so it did get submitted later than what we had originally hoped. But again, it was MMSA doing a lot of the legwork, making sure they improved our chances of being successful in this process. So they figured probably within the next, probably now a month to 6 weeks, is when we'll find out if we made kind of a preliminary pass. It goes into 2 stages. Within the first 2 months, they will say whether you even made somewhat of the short list, and then they think they're going to take another 2 to 3 months to actually confirm whether you're victorious. So hopefully within the next 6 weeks or so, we should know whether we made first phase.
So when's the grant going? When do they come out and make the announcement on who's successful? Because hopefully we know fairly soon. So if we're going to be doing some asset management,
it's supposed to be probably within let's say a month or so. We should know whether we at least make the first cut, and they say about 2 months after that they'll award. So, I mean, the good news is at least within a month we know whether we've been shortlisted, and then you're getting close to it. But if we don't hear nothing in the month and a half, it means we didn't even make the cut, and we start moving on to step B.
And we don't really have a plan B on this one because we're counting on the money to do it, right?
Yes, it's not in the budget.
It's not in the budget.
So if it doesn't occur, we'll continue to do some things on a paper format. Maybe one of the things we've talked about is maybe getting more of our gas lines within the system, because there's some that aren't on there. So we're still going to proceed with a little bit, but on a pretty minor scale.
Yeah, and what can we get MMSA to do on asset management? That's what you're talking about.
Yes,
they would do some of that.
Yeah, so they would be doing that. So we are in the process of, because some of our files are old and some of them were newer, and so we know there was some pieces of past infrastructure and some electronic files with another consultant or another engineer. So we're actually in the process of trying to get those electronic files so we can get MMSA to actually put them on one of our layers. So we're gonna continue down the electronic means, but it's just gonna be a lot slower, like really slow.
And if we're successful with the grant, what is the plan? So,
so it's gonna involve a few things. Ultimately, what we're hoping to have is to document as much of our infrastructure and GIS layers as possible. That's the main thrust. And that would include everything from like fire hydrants locations and like put them
water
all,
lines, sewer lines,
the water
all of
lines,
that
sewer lines,
stuff.
gas lines, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
And not only would it be GIS where it's located, but also some data on when it was installed, how old it is.
Yep.
So all of that stuff's in one location. All of that information's in one location.
That's right. And then that kind of ties into your whole asset management strategy. Because if you have several wastewater lines that are 40 years old, if we have that data, then you can start seeing where probably the pinch points are. And what we can also add on there is when we do analysis on some of our infrastructure, like if MPE ever has to go in and take a look at the line, oh yeah, no, it's only 30% left. Well, that can be charted out too. So it's a one-stop shop for all your assets, so you can find out where the heck it's at.
Does that include our roads when they were done, how old it is? That would
Yep.
include roads also, and curbs and gutters and sidewalks? And
It's as much as we can, like some municipalities even put trees, even go as far as the trees and where all your litter boxes are, right? So it should become your complete asset inventory of all the stuff that you see, even including trees, your fences, state of the gravel, etc.
yeah.
So I'm not sure how far that grant funding is going to get us, but that's what we'll do.
Get us started anyway, some more of it.
Absolutely. Well, there's not much on the system now.
Yeah.
So
And it's all scattered, it's not put together.
When Vern gets asked certain things, he runs to the back and he grabs his blueprints. Like the vast majority of the time. He knows by memory most of the stuff. And say it's really unfortunate because I know in a couple projects I've worked with him on it, or just getting information, says no, those ones aren't on the plans. He knows it's there. Like the line is there. It's not on the paper, but it's there, and it is there. So that's not very good.
Yeah.
And even when we were working with Canadian Fiber in a few places, he had to tell him, no, the line extends there, and it's over there as well. It's not a good system.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think it's the most important to grab some of that stuff that's in people's heads to get that down as much as we can.
Before it's not in your head.
Yeah, and
Yeah, or not here. And, I mean, like they're not going to work here forever, right?
Well, and they could get Alzheimer's or
Yeah.
an injury or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
well, that last water main break that occurred, you shouldn't use that word,
Yeah.
that incident that occurred about a month and a half ago, it was part of it was on a dead line that was supposed to be cut off, but part of it was still leading into a lot. So, oh gee, we thought that line was closed. So there's infrastructure under there that people forgot, right? So I think that's we'll continue drafting the policy depending on if we get the grant funding, depends how quick this thing takes legs. But an entire asset management policy, and not just policy is the easy part. It's all the underpinnings to have a really good, successful asset management plan is an enormous amount of work. When we filled in the grant, it had all these various questions along the pendulum, like as far as how is your municipality making current asset management replacement decisions? Like, is it done by like staff's expertise and like there's 4 phases, and most municipalities can't even get to, I think it's step 5. It's almost impossible to get to step 5 in all of them, but yeah, most of our stuff, we're on either level 0 or 1, and there's 5 levels. That's where we're at. And so in this whole grant application, we have to tell them where we're at and where we're hoping to get. And so in a lot of these, we're just hoping to get to like fulfill number 1 and maybe 1.5. And I think 1 out of about the 5 or 6 categories is get to number 2. So it just shows you how far we still have to go even with this money. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, it gives I think, unless anybody else has any questions. I know we got a long ways to go, but I know it's very important for future grants to be able to have that documented and showing. I know just with previous discussions with Rick McIver as the minister, he said, if you don't have an asset management plan, you're not going to get any grants for asset management. Like he said, you've got to have a good plan, or in the future, you're not going to get a grant. So we need to get that, and we need to get it in place so we have a chance at future grants.
So just to go one step further on that, so I really appreciate you bringing that up. I believe every other province, with that federal gas tax that we get, that's now called the...
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Community enhancement or community development or something like that. Yeah.
The other provinces, you have to have an asset management plan in place. So Alberta somehow got a bit of an exception in that process. There's some flexibility in that, but you know it's coming. So
I was just going to say that, Rod. I was going to say that we were tied to the gas tax to have the levels done. By July, you had to have this phase.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you how many asset classes because I find that we're behind, like this was far advanced by 2 years.
Yeah, Alberta, we somehow the provincial government negotiated giving us, like the entire province, some relief as far as timelines. I think it's every other province has to already be so far down the line. So it's coming real fast.
Yeah.
And we're not close.
Well, and that was part of that money for those grants is to get everybody to that point where they'll have a plan and can be better basing it on, making better decisions.
And if we don't get successful here, there is going to be a timeline. So at some point, there will be a budget ask because we are going to have to invest in that process, and it is a lot of work. So, I think that's a good point for you to bring up, because if we don't get this, it's going to be another hit in our budget next year or the year after.
So how many asset classes have we identified here for us in High Prairie?
I can't even
Like there's
answer.
roadworks, there's this, there's that, and you're right. At some point we had to think about engineering for roadworks because there's a grading. We utilized our foreman, just like a Vern, who had everything in his head, and I was willing to kind of do the grid work, but some of it was our own effort, but it could get expensive, and some of the municipalities sort of teamed up and split engineering costs, and it's big business for a lot of vendors out there too, because they know this is coming and they know the municipalities have to get it done.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are working on a policy, and that'll be done in July. That's still one of the priorities. Okay. Moving on, then we had capital plan priorities December 2021, and it's embedded in the budget process. So I think we've done that already. We've approved the capital plan, and it's always adjusting and changing, as we know. But can we take that off of sort of the top thing that we needed to get done, or where are we at with that? I'm thinking it's done. But
To me, so I put down it was done in December 2021. I think that's when it was presented. And in my opinion, it's now embedded in our process. So once the strategy's been, some of them, once they're accomplished and they become part of our fabric or our everyday business, then in my opinion, it should come off.
okay, so this is one that could come off.
I believe so, because you're going to get another update in April, and next December you should get another update, but it's now part of the budget process. So I believe it comes off.
Yeah.
or recommended comes off.
Okay, so when I'm looking at our top 5 priorities, there's 2 of them we can check off. We can check off Big Lakes County, because we got that started, and we've got the capital plan done. And then the next items just below that, the now and the next, was the economic readiness strategy, service capacity reviews, community brand refresh, social media, reserves policy, fire services master plan. So I guess I'm just wondering, which is the priorities to move back up on our, so we got the 5 key things that we're working on. What would be the next priority?
I can tell you what it's not.
Now, just maybe we can just talk a little bit about each of these, and then we can decide just to make sure. So, number 1, economic readiness strategy, and it says a form here. If I remember right, and I'm not sure if I do, but this was talking about we wanted to have a forum of people together to talk about how to bring the town forward economically. Was that what we were talking about? Or does anybody?
I recall that, and I think I also recall maybe even the hospital lands. So it was talking about where, that's part of the pieces I remember. Like, there's some land, what's the attitude, what's the business culture out there as far as the economy, and what are some of the things that we need?
Yeah, so that was a meeting to get the business
leaders,
community together and say, okay, what can we do to help guide this? Is there anything the town can do? Was that what this was? Or it is?
So I might be confused. I thought that was getting the shovel-ready projects, for when the grant comes out. That's the way I understood it.
No, the grant, so that piece was, sometimes the grants come out, one of the conditions is shovel ready. And so from my perspective, one of the things we wanted to do, and we have a couple shovel ready projects, both the downtown blocks they're ready to go. No matter what we do, we always keep one of those projects back. We always have one project kind of in the kitty, ready to go. If the government announces a grant, we have something that we can apply in. So never reduce your list of capital items that aren't ready to roll. That's at that.
Right. Yes. Right.
So that was more from our side, meaning like refurbish a road,
Right.
water pipe.
Okay, so going back to that economic readiness strategy, what else did that involve? Was that, I know we had discussed us as a council saying, providing some direction on what we needed in town, like we needed a Jiffy Lube. and we talked about Jiffy Lube, we talked about maybe some newer apartments for young professionals to come in and stay in, some nice, like those were some things that we identified that would be good in this town, and then going out and trying to actively bring those businesses, those opportunities into our town. Is that what we were talking about with this economic readiness strategy? That's what I'm not sure what we were talking about here. So we had those 2 different things, or are they related, where we would say we want the businesses to come together and say, what do we need? And get their ideas and not just ours. And maybe it is that we need this, this, and this in our community. So we think this is what we need. So then we talk to the businesses and say, this is what we think we need in the community. What do you guys think? And get some ideas. And maybe they want to invest, the local people want to invest in what we need here. And here's what we can offer. Like, is that, I'm trying, or maybe those two were put together, I'm not sure.
So seeing here, I think it was part of our overarching economic diversity strategy, increasing our tax base, local job creation, seeking partnerships, engaging with local stakeholders, home-based business support and expansion, both regional and so one of the tactics to that strategy was hosting an economic readiness forum. We would do that, developing an economic readiness strategy and what those targets would be, preparing community profile for website, we had all these, I don't even remember saying these things, but exploring highway and commercial potential. These were all of the things in that economic diversity strategy. It's number 5 on your, in your, number 5
on page 3. Yeah. So and then we said on here, the economic readiness strategy. I'm not really sure, and we wanted a forum. So I think that was getting businesses and the public together to say, what do we need, right?
Yeah, key stakeholders.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what one of the things that we identified as a priority. The next one was a service capacity review and to do a workshop on that. Now, what do people remember about that one? What is that? Service capacity review, a workshop.
I think this had to do with the services that the town provides its residents and what services should be enhanced and or potentially changed. So I think that was part of it. It includes also, recreation and like this is where the topic I don't want to bring up, the snow removal, et cetera, that we've talked about quite a few times over the past 6 months. But that was, that's our services, right? And what?
Okay, that's what you, okay. Does anybody remember anything different out of that one, of the service capacity review? Sort of getting, what Rod's saying is just getting feedback from residents and businesses on what services the town should provide.
I think we need to look at our services we provide, not as a workshop, but as a group, look at our services we provide and
We have been doing that.
but get real numbers.
This is, from my perspective, I think we've been doing that and we've been getting the best numbers that we can. And I'm not saying on all of our services because we provide this much, but as council, we've looked at the ones where we thought, well, these ones are iffy, right? Do we want to do this or not do this? So, and that's the cutting of the boulevards or the snow removal on the sidewalks. We've talked about those as being maybe ones that we can drop, but I think this idea was to ask residents more, have sort of a workshop with them to say, okay, here's some ideas. We're looking for ways to, what are people willing to do or not willing to do?
So we had this come up under budget challenges, and we also talked about sponsorship opportunities, alternate revenue, and I don't know who proposed that, but I don't know what alternate revenue is. But underneath that was service capacity review, explore sponsorship options, and propose 3-scenario budget format. What is that, Rod? But it's service review. It's exactly what you said: service level review, service delivery options, alternate revenue, and sponsorship possibilities. It's very next on the list.
It's number 7 on
Budget.
page 3 of the package.
Where are we going with that? Or
It's funny, yeah.
I know.
Yeah, trying to remember this is good
We should have put in examples, what I mean?
to help remember what we were talking about. Yeah.
whoever proposed it would remember. Any of you remember proposing it? 'Cause
I would say in would have come from me, but I can't remember saying a workshop. I can't understand what the workshop is all about. Do you know what I'm saying? If anybody would have been harping on it, it would have been me. But how the workshop gets in there, I don't know.
Well, and I think it's some way of getting feedback from the residents, right? How do we get that feedback from what people really want? How do we get that kind of input? So let's, I mean, what we're doing at this point is reviewing these next items and making sure we have a grasp on what they are, and then we can talk a little bit more about which one we think is a priority. So I think we know what that service capacity review and workshop was. We have an understanding. So let's go to community brand refresh. And I know that's under community image. We talk about, you know, the business perspectives, the residential perspectives, brand refresh. It's improving the community image and doing some of that kind of stuff. And part of it, when I think that's part of that business prospectus is that thing that we have on our website, right? That is part of the business prospectus because that gives people the information about our community if they're looking at doing business in our town. But we don't know how much that actually gets used, but we know it's important for businesses to know that. I think that's what we were talking about, is giving new businesses the information they need, and right? Like we were talking about that. And that same thing of giving something to, having something for people that are looking to coming to town, all of the key information that they need to move into town. And that actually ties into something that, you know, that a physician attraction and retention committee, that, you know, we wanted to have something to give new people that are, new doctors that are coming to town, what's in our town, where they can get stuff. That sort of one pager that identifies a lot for them. They've actually, rural RPAP has actually put together a one pager on us already. And we may, you know, whenever we get that attraction and retention committee together, they can help look at that, make sure it's accurate and meets the needs of what the new physicians or anybody coming to town would want. We may want to take what they've got and put it out there for new people.
See, the branding refresh is what's confusing me.
Okay, yeah, what is the community brand refresh?
Yeah, what is that?
That's a good question, because we just redid the brand. I mean, that was 4 years ago that we
spent a lot of money.
Yeah, we spent some money. I wouldn't say it was a lot. That was, in terms of rebranding, that was very, in my opinion, that was a minimal of money to redo a brand, but yes.
Signs, flags, business cards.
Yeah, that's...
But anyways,
yeah.
The refresh.
So what else did we want to do? That's a good question. What was the community brand refresh? What else was involved with
I
that?
think this was Judy. I think this was, well, the term wasn't great, but I think this had to do with, you know, trying to make like the Main Street like more attractive and getting rid of, you know, just,
garage sale signs?
well, that was piece of it, but it was, you know, some of the signage along the main drag
Maybe.
is,
But,
you know, a little bit
why didn't you
disrepaired.
just call it cleaning it up instead of branding?
I thought, I'm sure that discussion came up. That was part of it.
Oh, okay.
Like dealing with the weeds. Remember, we were dealing with weeds at the time as well. This was to try to make it more inviting for businesses. Now, there were comments about coming into town and the aesthetics were not the best.
Right.
Let's make it more inviting. Who on earth is going to, you know, drive through this town and then want to invest in it? There was part of that, I think, here.
Oh, okay. So, and it's maybe not brand, but it was community image,
Yeah.
maybe
that
would be a
make
better
more
term,
sense.
right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
It's more of a
I think that would make more
community image refresher trying to.
Yeah, because there was no talk whatsoever of
Of
changing our
rebranding.
signs and rebranding. Like,
Yeah.
I never heard one thing about that.
So community image is the very next one on number 8. So it's like we had two different ones anyway, because number 8 says community image, attraction, and
Or branding refresh in
oh,
there.
it's in
yeah.
there actually, yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it wasn't so about changing the brand per se, but just a modernization. Maybe our website being modernized, because it isn't. It isn't. We're not following the flow chart of what a normal, So maybe that's all it was. Maybe it was just because that's our first image. Before someone even drives to High Prairie, what did I first do? Google it, right? And I talk to friends and tell them where I am. They Google it. So that's the first thing that they see before even stepping and seeing your front street and the roads and the whatnot. Everyone Googles everything today. So it's like, oh, where the heck are you? Well, the first thing someone does is Google it. And maybe that's all it was. A simple
Maybe
image
it
that
was
is
a
so-
website refresh.
Maybe.
That
I think
would
that
make
was
more
actually,
sense than the brand.
Yeah.
I think that was, now that I think about it, I think it was with the website, yeah, because I seem to remember something like that now.
So can we, would everybody agree to, instead of a community brand refresh, that was a website update?
For sure.
Would we?
We're not even updating, modernizing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
They just need to go and put up some text, but modernizing it so it can feel, and even maybe content.
Oh yeah, there's yeah. So I'm going to change that so I know in the future what it means, and we'll put it down as website. If that's what everybody thinks that meant at the time, because right, I think that's a website. Or is it the community image and the town cleanup that we're talking about here? Like that, those are the two things that we're kind of wrestling with.
Or was it both, sorry, Ron?
No.
So I can't say, so I just, because under operational initiatives, we have website. So it
okay.
is there, just so you, sorry to interrupt me,
okay,
but
so it was
it's
separate.
right, so it's there.
Yeah.
So I,
Okay, yeah, we have the website.
It's already there, yeah.
but then,
I'm looking here, and I mean, this is where it sort of fits, that website. Oh, and then underneath community prospectus is the community brand refresh. So it's, it's listed there twice. So it's, that community brand probably isn't the website that we were thinking of,
It can't be, no.
because it is listed separately, the website, and then community brand refresh is underneath it.
Yeah, so it's gotta be two separate, yeah.
Yeah, so it might have
Yeah.
been the community brand was probably more the town cleanup or the town image. Again, yeah, trying to remember.
I have to go home and get my,
Rod, did Gord put this
Yeah.
together, or did you? Gord put it together. Okay.
no, Gore did. I mean, we helped with some of it.
Yeah.
We had all those sheets. Remember we had all those sheets and
And took the ideas,
took the
tried to
ideas and
lump them
tried throwing them in.
So, just for our purposes, I mean, what we really meant back then, what do we want the community brand refresh to look like? We got the website refresh down below in under corporate, number 2. But corporate brand refresh is listed under a community prospectus. What do we want that to be, or do we want to just scratch that off because we can't remember it?
no, don't scratch it.
So what do we want to call it that we're going to remember what that meant?
So, just, maybe you guys already talked about it and I had caught in between my ears. Page 6 on this, it talks about community image. And it got a fair number of votes.
And remember, we asked staff as well as council to vote. So you're seeing it from two perspectives, and you're right, it was like halfway, 23 votes in you know.
I mean, it made the short list, like the top 12. Even in councils, it was, well, maybe, yeah, probably
So-
the top 12.
So if we called it community image,
Right.
we would know better what we were talking about as opposed to community brand?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's change that term to community image. And then I think we all have an idea of what that means.
And now, like, I don't know if this come from the workshop or if it just come from long-term memory, where people don't know where High Prairie is. They always refer, oh, you're way up north. No, that's high level. Oh, you're way down south. Like, yeah, maybe that's what it was about. And the signage and the trees, because I want the tree line pulled back so you can actually see that there's houses and businesses in the town.
We have to agree to disagree on getting rid of the trees, I'll tell
I'm saying on Main Street, on the highway.
Anyway, well, so we know what, that's not, we're gonna call it community image.
Yeah.
And then, so let's move to social media policy. That was one of our priorities, was to come up with a policy on social media. And help me what that, who remembers what that was? I know we, is it our policy on how we should be using social media as a town and promoting our town on social media? Was that what we were talking about? Getting out there, and I'm going to say it's more of a communications issue and using social media to communicate more, and how we wanted to do that and how we were going to do that. Is that what this issue, which this was, or is it something different? Because I do know we talked about communications, and we did talk about we wanted to use social media, but I'm not sure what that is the same as social media policy. Is that what we meant by this one?
So I also think it includes effective feedback management. So I think using those platforms that are already out there buzzing that we don't control, but we don't have any appropriate policy or way, mechanism, person of delivering effective feedback management from the things that come out there. If you allow people to say things, to say willy-nilly what they want on the ether, then we're not addressing it, you know, because I don't know, people say things on Facebook all the time, but no official word from council ever gets put back there. So I think feedback is just to close that loop. No, you're right, or no, you're wrong. Like that lady who came in the other day. No, she thought we all got raises. No, we didn't. You know, but if we're not saying it officially, then the word out there is that, and then it just perpetuates. You have that little echo chamber, and it just perpetuates the wrong thing.
So again, it's more communicating and how we want to communicate through social media. Okay? So that's what that one means. The reserves policy, I think we've done that one, right? We can actually scratch that off. That's been done. We've approved it as council. We're good. Okay. And fire services master plan. Was this supposed to be emergency management master plan, or was it just fire? Because we're working on our emergency management plan that we got the consultant, and we're doing that with a joint plan, or was this something specific to Trevor and fire?
No, I think Trevor, the only thing he's working on is more procedures. So that, to me, means the ECC, or the Regional Emergency Plan.
Oh, okay. So this is the regional emergency plan? Can we rename that so we know what it means better? Or am I missing something here?
I can't even recall this being talked about.
It must be one of the ones that was voted on. Where did we, what did we call it there?
But why would we bring in our emergency regional thing to a workshop? Why would we even bring it up?
I don't see, I don't see it on our items list as being fire plan anywhere, right? So this has obviously been sort of clustered to say somebody's, Gord probably accumulated a few different things and called them fire services. But I really think that what he was talking about, because that was something that we were working on, was that regional emergency plan collaboration.
But did we even talk about that at the workshop? Why would we talk about that at the workshop?
Was that part of regional collaboration? Was it under that umbrella of regional collaboration because we're collaborating on an emergency management plan?
But that, like, it's not like we have a choice in it. It's not, like, we have to have that. So
Why would, I don't know, I just can't recall that one.
Okay, no.
Maybe, I'm gonna say maybe, because it.
We're all trying to remember, but you know what? It doesn't matter what was meant there. What do we want it to reflect at this point in time? Because we know it's changing, something that we're going to remember what this means.
Because it was under, it's under, like, under the operational initiatives on page 7, it's under protective, so it's safety, I think, but to me, the fire services master plan, to me, it makes more sense being that regional collaboration that we had done with the EOC or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's what I remember in my head and stuff, so.
Okay, well, let's rename it that so we're all in agreement, right? So let's just, instead of fire services, we're going to call it Regional Emergency Management Plan.
What does TCA stand for?
Tangible capital assets.
Oh. So why aren't we using that list instead of the 63 list? If you go to page 6, it's on issues, opportunities, short list. Why aren't we using our short list instead of?
Well, what we had done, and if I remember, and we can tell we all have different memories from that, but we went through this list, the opportunities list, and then we prioritized the top ones, and then we said what were the top priorities, the top action list items that we wanted to do. So we took the top 5, and then we listed the next, what was that, 6 that we thought were the next kind of priority. So once we took something off the list, we could then move something up, all right? It's that living document.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get our head around what were the next 6 things that were important so that we can maybe move 1 or 2 of them back up to the top priorities. That's what we're doing right now. What's the next? We took 2 things off the list, Big Lakes Management and Capital Management Plan. So now we're ready to maybe move 2 more things up that we would focus on and get those done, put a timeline on them, and maybe an action plan of what that looked like.
I think it's the next 2 on the list. I mean, widening our tax base is number 1. If we have less people then sharing the burden, I think that we need to work on figuring out if there is something we can do, and so if that falls under economic readiness, then that's, I think, in every which way, widening our tax base is something that we need to look at to come at the other side of our budget. One way to look at our budget is wishes, wants versus needs, and cutting as much as we can, but the other one is also, bringing in more revenue, right? And maybe looking at, part and parcel, looking at services, and I don't know, there's those that are not paying taxes. Maybe we find other ways to build them. I don't know how to widen your tax base, but that's part of our economic development plan, right? And I'm not sure what kind of traction it's gotten over the last 5 years, but now would be a great time to kind of give it some thought.
Okay.
Whether it's marketing. I see that 22 staff votes came under tourism. So if they're looking for tourism opportunities, or if they've identified that as something that we need to look at, and marketing was another one, what does that mean and what does that look like?
Okay, so what you're saying, just if I can summarize, is see if I've caught it right, is saying that economic readiness strategy is one of our, should be moved up into the now, and we need to start working on it. That's what you're saying. Okay, good, I got it. Does anybody really feel that they're, well, we can, move one or two things up? We took two things off. I'm kind of like to see two things moved up, is just the way I work, but maybe that's all. Or would everybody agree that this is one of those next big things?
Well,
Yep.
I know it's your guys' plan, but we are doing work on the ESO site. So it's not the next pieces here, but it's something that is active. So that one probably should somehow move in there, right?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
because it is something we're working on and focusing on right now, right? In the
That is
next,
true, yeah.
at least until, I'm going to say May, June, when we meet with SO and see what we can do. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, so there's your two then.
Okay, is everybody happy with those two moving up? All right, so we'll put as number 3, we'll call it,
Whatever.
whatever. The next two will be economic readiness strategy and ESO.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not. Well, let me go back to the ESO. That was that's an advocacy things that never really stops, right?
well, so
But it
under,
will. But we're gonna.
well, yeah, but it was under brownfields. So I'm kind of struggling with this too, because we have on that page 6, issues, opportunities, short lists.
Yeah,
That
that's what I thought.
We
the
called
next
it-
should be.
brownfields. I don't think it really matters what we call it, but I don't know what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like,
No, I get it.
Well, and let's just talk for a second about the advocacy. That's the other side that we identified. What are our priorities for advocacy? And we've talked about the hospital property transfer, and we're currently working on that. The ESO site, we're currently working on that. But
Even Project Aurora, we're working on that.
That too.
Project Aurora, we're working on that. That's
Anka, I don't know why, you're working on that too, as far as Anka.
Yeah.
and hospital services, health, and getting more service. That's
Ongoing
one of
thing
those
for them.
ongoing, all the time things. So, wish we had Gord here to help clarify our thinking again once more. But in my head, these advocacy efforts are something that we're focusing on for the next little while, right? So, do those move up into a council priority, or do they stay as advocacy? That's where I'm struggling a little bit. Because if we
Yeah.
talk about the broadband, is that an advocacy? Because we're advocating the government for that, for sure. We're trying to get funding for it, but we're also, we're doing some action that's not advocacy. We're talking about whether or not we want to help fund it, how we're going to promote or try to get the whole town done versus the rest of it. So advocacy to me is, okay, we're lobbying the government to do something, and we are doing that, but we're also doing something else on broadband. We're sort of advocating on one hand, but we're also taking action and initiative on the other side.
Yeah, and that's right. You can't put the advocacy on our priority list because our priority list has to end, like it has to be ticked off. Advocacy, some of them is ongoing.
Okay. Okay, so are we all right with that?
Well, I guess, so I agree, I think that advocacy stays there, that's that's your elevator speeches, right? Those are the ones that you are going to do what you can to give our elevator speech. I think though, in our next priorities, like back to the ESO site, we called it the brownfield site on our opportunities. And so that's why I think, because this list here is somewhat incorporated here, that is one that we're doing. So it would become a priority because it is being worked on. Right?
And we can
Okay,
take
just
it
so-
off and take it off when it's done, yeah.
Okay, I'm good. If that's,
Okay,
everybody's
so-
thinking the same thing.
So do we want to take the ESO site and put it on as the priority that we're working on it with them, or is this still advocating?
No,
It's an action.
It's an action because if someone come up to you and say, what has council done? Well, guess what? We got the old hospital demolished, we got the ESO, like, it's a thing, it's, I don't know how to say it, it's
there, it's a visual, it's a concrete thing that we actually got done. We're advocating as an ongoing thing.
Yeah. Okay. So we need to sort of define, I guess if it's advocacy, to me, that's that lobbying part of it. Or is this an action item that we have control over and we can do something about?
No.
So that's where I'm kind of, if we have control over it, then I think it's good. It's an action. It's a now thing that council can do. If we don't have control over it, I think it's more of an advocacy. That's in my head where I have this differentiated. And with ESO, we don't really have control. So I think it stays an advocacy, even though it's one of our active ones. But I'm open to see how you want to put it on our report.
I think, because we moved economic readiness strategy to the spot where Big Lakes. And then I think the ESO site should be on the now, because it's something that we're working on now. And both of those issues are advocacy, because I think if I remember correctly, when we were talking about economic readiness or whatever, was to enhance the approach of council to businesses that own land in our town, like what is it, the no frills people, you know, advocating with them, saying, you know, like, we're developing in the East End. We have Tim Hortons coming, we have a Dairy Queen coming at the West End, you have this land, like, you know, what can we do to help you develop it? Kind of strategy is what I remember.
I remember some of that.
Yeah, I think we're all understand that economic readiness strategy and developing what we want to do and how to get, you know, as Sasha mentioned, expand our tax base, how to grow that part of it. I'm just struggling with what's advocacy and what's a now item, and what, if we can get that clear, I think we'll be a little bit better off. Unless somebody else has an understanding of how this should go on. To me,
I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's that clear. I think there's a gray area. It can't be black and white.
okay, and maybe that's
I
true.
get what you're saying, but
But I'm looking at, and when I look at this, I look at the hospital site, and then we had a concept. So to me, that concept is, what did we want there? And we talked about the outdoor rink, and this is Barry's idea of having all of this recreation stuff there, or what did we want to see happen with that land? And I think we've had that discussion to say we want this land to be tax base property. That's what we as council said. So we have a concept of what we would like to see there. So that was number one. Number two was to say, okay, give it to us, we'll maintain it. So we have a concept of what we want. Now we're going out and we're lobbying for that property transfer, or we're advocating for it. So I don't know if that's instead of a concept up above the hospital site, it might be lobbying is the priority, right? It's now gone from we have the concept, we know what we want, now we have to see if we can get it. So if I'm looking at number two, I'm scratching off concept and putting down lobbying. So if lobbying is on there,
It should come off.
yeah, then
We're
it's,
lobbying, then it should come off our action list.
yeah, we're lobbying for the land, but it's still something that we do and can control. We're being proactive in lobbying for that land, for our community. So I guess Esso in that site, that's the priority for the next 3 months, is the lobby on that. So we keep it in there. That's a priority lobby. Okay? So let's add Esso in there and change the hospital to lobbying, because we've got a concept. We're lobbying now. Now, the other thing I'm wondering, Rod, are you capturing this so that we can record? And we have a new one-pager, because this is the key page that we want to keep on our right here, and we can look at it every day to say, okay, what was our priorities, right? And understand what it means a little bit better.
So I have been attempting to take notes, just the last little bit here. Maybe I somewhat, what I think I heard, and I'm going to try to repeat. Hospital is moving to advocacy. So it's up in this top left corner. We're moving it. We're going to remove it from our now list. Is that what I heard?
No.
Okay, so up in this top, whatever, left corner, we're keeping hospital site and we're including ESO.
No, well, yeah, but instead of where it says hospital site, Rod, it says a
Yeah,
concept.
take off concept. Actually, I did that about a half hour ago.
Oh,
So I don't know if I just took it off or if we actually talked about that.
And
So
now we put it down as lobbying or advocacy.
Okay, so keep it up there, but just call it lobbying. Okay, I'm okay. And then you said,
And then we wanted to move ESO up into a now lobbying. So our advocacy is becoming one of those top priority lobbying advocacies for the next 3 months. That's somewhere in the next 3 months we want to, this is the hard time to push for these two things. Yeah.
okay, so under, okay, I can definitely do that. ESO site is now one of the top 5. And over the next 3 months, it's going to be lobbying according to our plan. Do you folks think under advocacy, we still keep hospital and ESO there? Does it just stay there? See that it's in the top left. Do we keep it?
I
in
think
that
we
chart?
take it off of the advocacy thing because it's
So
now
we're
a
doing-
top priority. That's my head, but we need council to say yes or no.
Do you see the example of hospital? It's both under now and advocacy. So I think things can happen. Your definition, Mr. Mayor, was absolutely correct, but I think that the two can happen in tandem. Like I think that that can be in a particular case, hospital or ESO, and ongoing advocacy to pitch, to keep on it. But the now things, I think things can come on and off of there. Like look at the hospital example. It's on both. It's in advocacy and in the now. So at that time, when we did this in November, it took both places.
Yes, but in the hospital site, the now part of it was to come up with a concept, come up with a plan for the site. We now have that plan done. So in essence, we could cross off hospital site because it's done. But we were just talking that, we want to keep pushing and lobbying, and it's one of our priorities in the next 3 months to now either get or not get that land but at least be proactive in working on it.
So it stays in advocacy, or it stays in now?
Well, I think it stays in now.
Just the word concept comes off.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, we can leave it in both for now. It's an ongoing one. Okay, so are we in agreement that we have the 5 priorities, our broadband utility, and we're gonna, now before it was a review, what do we want to call it now? Is broadband construction? What's the action here? Is getting, to me, is getting some,
Installation, freaking let's get this down.
Yeah.
Put it down, like installation, get it, let's speak positively, so if we say installation, maybe it'll be installed, you know.
broadband utility, and then instead of a review, we want installation.
Yeah,
Okay, let's put it there. We know what we want to do there. We talked long about it. So this is the priority. The hospital site, and we're going to put lobbying. So hold on, let's just go back to broadband utility installation. The timeline is July, right? And we know we have a meeting with them to promote that and stuff, but okay, next one is hospital site lobbying, and we're gonna put March, meet with minister. Is that what we want to do? Are we all in agreement? Okay. Then we had, well, I don't know if we want to say that economic readiness strategy form. When do we want?
We need more clarity on that.
Well, in my head, this economic readiness strategy, I think we really need to come up with a plan of when and how we want to bring this forward, how we would want to get community input, how we might want to bring businesses together. Like we have to come up with a whole strategy around that, on how we want to bring that forward.
So let's just say economic readiness or economic development, concept, or you know, because we have to come up with a concept or come up with a development plan.
A plan, economic readiness strategy and a form, or maybe a plan for a form or something like that, right? And we want a plan for a form. And what's our timeline on that? What's realistic? Are we talking in June? I have a good plan by June, so we'd have March, April, and May to do it, 3 months to do that? Because it's going to be another meeting, something like this, where we'd have to sit down and brainstorm exactly what we want, when we would do it, how we would do it, what are the costs, the implications. So it's a meeting, but it's an action meeting of what do we want to do exactly, so that we can make it happen.
let's start in 2 months, why don't we?
Okay, so what are you saying, June? Everybody's in agreement? Okay. And the asset management policy is still July. All right. And then the other one was the ESSO site, and we're going to say sort of a plan for that. Let's call it June, because if they're going to come up in May or June. Okay. I might, because I don't know if it's next or if we want to go to 6 items. I'm just looking down at the emergency management plan. That's ongoing, and that's going to be finished in June, right?
It's close.
Yeah, it's close. So why don't we move that up to and make it a number 6 and done by June?
Yeah.
Okay, does everybody agree with that? Because it is something that we're actively working on, and it's actually not council as much as it is administration, right? So maybe,
Because you folks, like when we did this, I think that bylaw was actually passed with this new council. So I'm sure it was, because Swan Hills and Big Lakes, remember actually Swan Hills was still in the bylaw or some darn thing. I think that was this council.
Yeah.
So the plan, I don't even know if council ultimately has to pass the plan. We'll absolutely give it to you, but I think it's pretty much, once you do that bylaw, which you did in December, January, the plan itself is, I don't think it really needs to be approved by council. But it's still a big piece.
oh yeah, it
It's a
has to get
massive-
done.
And it is so close. So I don't mind. So I don't mind adding it to put it to the top. It's got to get done. It is so close.
Yeah, and it will be done because the only thing really is they were doing the last review of it, and then they were going to, the other piece was the exercise, the emergency exercise that would be done in the community. And that was really it, right? And then those guys are done, and it's turned over to the municipalities to run it after that. That's the last of and at that point in time, it's done.
I can give an update on that. I think the date is May 8th or 9th.
For the
emergency, the exercise.
The exercise, okay. So why don't we move that up and say June, and then it's off of our list after
Well,
that?
yeah, and then it keeps us focused, like, where are we with that? Where are we? Our
Yeah.
deadline is coming, yeah.
Make sure. So we'll put it down as June, and hopefully it'll be done by there. That'll be number 6.
Okay, but let's not do that again. Let's keep it in groups of 5.
Yeah, okay. And we,
We're
like I
always
said,
looking at it, so it's because then if
Yeah.
we start giving ourselves leeway, then we're,
Yeah.
nope, let's stick to our 5.
okay. All right. So I understand these priorities better now, having this discussion.
Well, we think we do.
I think we do, yeah. So we've definitely set ourselves up. We've got to set up another meeting to have a good discussion on where we want to go with that economic readiness. Now, in terms of advocacy, looking over at that, is there anything else that really changes or we want to change there? Now, MSI funding and AUMA, I think we can, AUMA is working on it. I don't know we're not going to be doing anything different as our council on that, are we? In my opinion, there's no use us going to MacGyver as an individual, as a minister, and say, hey, because he's not going to. Yeah, and everybody knows that we're lobbying for more money if we can get it. And as MacGyver told us when we were in there last at the Alberta Municipals Conference, is it's that local government fiscal framework that's coming up, and there's this pie, and he wants everybody to figure out how to divide that pie up between the municipalities. So that's really the strategies, and I think Alberta Municipalities is going to be working on how to divvy up that pie and maybe come with a plan. Mm-hmm. So they're going to take the lead on it. It's not really going to be us. So we're all right with that? We can scratch that off?
So the only one thing, and I want to get rid of things on the list, but and I know there's a lot of other communities like ours, but one of the things I think we're concerned with is in that formula, because there's going to be 350 municipalities working on this. AUMA may be only 300, but the part that we're concerned with is, I think because we're part of the region, right, and we provide recreation to a region, and so however, before the formula to distribute the 770 million or whatever the number was population, roads, kilometers of roads, and equalization. And I don't know if it was a third, and I think it was, but whatever. So if that formula is the same, Equalization, well, our market doesn't really expand. Well, it hasn't, right? That's not great for us. Our roads aren't really increasing because we're not growing. And population is going down, at least based on the census, right? So all three of those factors are not good, like, is all negative. I think the only things we maybe have, like, our expenses keep going up because we've got, in my opinion, like, more rec opportunities than most municipalities our size. 2 rinks, curling rink. And so maybe what we need to do is lobby for that whole regional approach where we're basically funding a population of 15, I'm making this number up, 12,000, 15,000 on the recreation side. And that money doesn't come in.
Basically talking about the reserves and settlements that aren't contributing to those recreation facilities. Lobbying to try and get more, to get funding from them. And we know we're not going to get funding from them, but maybe the federal government might contribute, right? That's what you're saying.
That, or if it somehow gets included in the formula, I don't know how you do it, but if those 3 foundational ones stay similarly and we don't get anything else added, that whole MSI formula, if our pie was like that big, it's going to go to, you know, half a toothpick. Because we're going down, like Edmonton, they used to have, maybe not right now, but only a couple of years ago, their population was increasing 30,000 people a year. So when you have a bucket that's this big, and everybody else is growing, and you're not, what are you going to end up with? So I think you've got to have something else in that formula that protects those municipalities that have all this infrastructure. We get it. We're not the growing municipality. But how do you sustain yourself to ensure you still have the water and the roads for the few that are still here? Because the formula is going to be death. I don't have an answer for you. The only thing I've ever been able to come up with is the rec stuff. I am sure we got to be the highest per capita as far as availability of recreation stuff. Like, you know, we got more hours of availability of good infrastructure than a lot. And that's good because it keeps, in theory, you keep your community healthy, which reduces the strain on the health system, et cetera, et cetera. So we are helping the province,
et cetera, yeah,
by doing that. So, but we're so small, but I don't know how you...
So it's got to stay under law.
It's got to stay in here somehow.
I see what you're, and we can leave it there.
But
MSI funding, and maybe what we want to do is almost more specific so we know in the future, because I'm thinking MSI, I'm thinking we talk about recreation funding, you know, change or lobby for recreation funding, because we have gone to, in the past, gone to Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and said, hey, this is an issue for our community, can you help us? We've gone there a couple of times for that lobbying for recreation funding, and we've got nowhere with him. Or, you know, the 2 ministers that we've talked to in the past. But that's what we were really lobbying for, was recreation funding at that extra third, that extra partner in there.
So may I ask a question? You know, just like we are trying to do an informal meet and greet and meet the new Big Lakes County Council, have we done that in the past with any of our regionals, First Nations, settlements, anything? Have we tried to meet them? Just to even get to know them and then ask for money, you know?
Yeah, not really. I mean, we have met with Peavine, and that's part of this ENCA meeting where we're meeting with some of them. We have never came out. I mean, I have mentioned that at the one meeting, that was one of our issues. But it was never, yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. There it's only the First Nation, so it's not everybody around us that influencing us. So I think we can change that to more recreation funding, and we can keep lobbying for it. And I mean, maybe we do want to go out and meet with them, but it's an ongoing advocacy regardless, right?
Did we not ask at one point to meet, like, some of the First Nations, like Sucker Creek and Roar? Didn't like, did we not send like a letter and we just never got a response? Like, we invited them to a council meeting and we never got a response?
I don't remember that.
Like, for some reason I'm thinking we tried, but we just, or we sent them a letter saying we would like to come to one of your meetings, and they just never responded.
Actually, I think you're right, way back, and this is going back to when our last council got started.
Yeah, the last election, not
Yeah.
this one, and
Yeah.
but we never ever got a response from any of them.
I think you're right, like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
We had sent something out, never really got a response, and it's just kind of
Yeah.
run off as
Because they think you're asking for money. If there's none of that, it's just, hi, we'd like to meet you. And
yeah, well, we didn't, I know we wouldn't have went there saying, we want money from you, can we come and talk to you
Well,
about
the
this?
board said, people don't take your meetings if they think that you're going to ask.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, we definitely
Guys,
didn't do
somebody
that.
wanna meet with us, somebody must need
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, what do they want?
Right. Yeah.
Well, and just for some of the new council, we did have, and I think it was 4 years ago when Councillor Rose hinted at a public meeting and said, you know what, we need to talk, or we should see or work with our neighbors to see if we can get some funding, or if we can lobby the government to get some funding for our recreation facilities. Well, that caused an uproar in the community. We had a couple of First Nation people come in and say, we pay our share in your town, we pay, the ice fees when we come in, so we're paying our share of those recreation facilities. And that wasn't what we were saying, that they didn't pay their share. Well, yes, we were saying they don't pay their share because we know
They
that.
don't help contribute to the
Yeah,
sustain.
we know that user fees in those facilities only cover either, in the arena, user fees are probably 60% of the costs, and in the pool, it's probably only about 30% of the costs of a pool. So, yes, they do pay their user fees, and it does help sustain those facilities, but it is not even close to the actual costs of operating those facilities. And I don't know if those communities understand that, right? I don't think the general public realizes that user fees don't cover the costs of those. Yeah. But that did cause a bit of an uproar when that was hinted, that we should be getting money from, and it wasn't the intent, but it was reported by Chris in South Peace News, and it wasn't reported really accurately, so it really caused a bit of an uproar at that time. That was before your time, wasn't it, Ron?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was going back 4 years or so. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Can we take a break?
Absolutely we can. We're
How
ready.
much longer are we gonna be?
There is, we're still working on this. We've got a couple of other agenda items.
Well, yeah, no, I mean on this, all we had to do was move up 2 items and we've been on it for an hour.
Yeah.
Heck, you know what, James is gonna be right. He's gonna come here and we're still gonna be
Yeah.
here.
I know!
I think we should make